Hello, my dear friend. Welcome to this gentle sleep story. My name is Tony, and it is my deepest joy to be here with you tonight, to be the voice that cradles you into rest and the guide that walks beside you as we leave behind the noise of the day and drift slowly into stillness. If this is your first time here, you are so very welcome. Like a traveler finding a warm hearth on a snowy evening. And if you've returned, I'm truly grateful to see you again, like an old friend finding their favorite seat by the fire. Your presence here fills this space with calm. Thank you for choosing to share this moment with me. I know today may have asked a lot of you. Perhaps your thoughts have been racing like pages caught in the wind. Or maybe your heart has felt heavy, weighed down by quiet worries or the ache of something unnamed. But now, you're here. In this soft, gentle pause, there is nothing more to do. Nothing you need to carry, nothing to fix or prove. You can let it all go. Right now, just as you are. I'm here to guide you, slowly, gently, toward a place of peace. Tonight, I will take you on a quiet journey, a story wrapped in stillness, set beneath mountain skies and silent snowfall. You'll meet a young woman named Claire, a seeker of something she could never quite name. Like many of us, she was living a life full of noise and slowly forgetting the sound of her own breath, until one day she left everything behind to follow a path that would bring her home, not to a place, but to herself. So now, before we begin, I invite you to settle in. Find the position that feels just right, a place where your body can rest fully supported, deeply held. Let the bed beneath you rise to meet you. Let your shoulders drop. Let the weight of the day slip off your back like a coat you no longer need to wear. Take a slow, deep breath in and exhale, softly, easily, like a wave rolling back into the sea. Inhale again and feel your chest fill with light, as if you're breathing in the morning sun. And exhale, letting go of tension like snow melting from a branch. Once more, inhale deeply and notice the quiet between your breaths, the stillness that lives in that space. And exhale now, letting that stillness spread through you like the hush of twilight settling on the earth. Let it soften your arms, your neck, your brow. Let your legs grow warm and loose. Let your jaw relax. Let your spine melt into the mattress. Now imagine your breath has a color. Maybe it's lavender like the sky at dusk, or golden like the flicker of a candle at your bedside. As you breathe in, let that color fill you gently, lovingly, bringing peace to every part of your body. And as you exhale, imagine a second color, cool and soft, perhaps deep blue or cloud gray, carrying away the noise, the pressure, the tightness you no longer need. Inhale, peace and warmth. Exhale, worry and weight. Inhale, a soft, steady glow. Exhale, and let everything go. You are safe now, held here. My voice will stay with you as we travel deeper together into stillness, into calm, into the sanctuary of stories. Before we begin, just a small favor. If this story brings you comfort or helps you rest, please consider liking and subscribing to support this space. It helps me create more gentle journeys just for you now. Close your eyes and come with me into a quiet story set far away from the rush of the world. This is Peace is Always With You, And it begins with a girl, a mountain, and the silence she had forgotten how to love. Part 1. The Weight of the City. Claire Monroe had once loved the city. She loved it for its rhythm, its constant hum, the way the streets never truly slept, as if the whole world was always just about to begin. At 25, it had thrilled her. At 28, it had pushed her. At 32, it had started to wear her down. Each day began the same, with her eyes cracking open. Not to sunrise, but to the buzz of her phone. Notifications like confetti that never stopped falling. Messages, reminders, headlines, all demanding her attention before her feet even touched the ground. She lived in a small apartment 4 floors above a bakery and 2 below a man who played the saxophone at 1 a.m. The walls were thin, the days were thinner. Her desk at work had a view of another building, a grey wall punctuated by the occasional bird, and more often, the blinking lights of someone else working late. Her planner was full, her weekends booked, her mind always humming. She smiled when she had to. She laughed when it made others comfortable. She answered emails with exclamation points, even when her hands felt heavy on the keys. And quietly, without drama, without collapse, she grew tired. Not tired like sleep, not tired like rest could solve, but tired like something inside her had been slowly fading like ink in water. She tried things, a meditation app, more matcha, a pottery class. She quit halfway through. Friends said she needed a change of scenery. Colleagues said she needed to be more assertive. Instagram told her to take a solo trip and find herself on a mountaintop. She scrolled past all of it, until one rainy afternoon, on a street she didn't normally walk, Claire ducked into the public library. She wasn't looking for anything. She only wanted out of the wind. The library smelled like old pages and wood polish. The lights were warm. The quiet was complete. She wandered past fiction, past biographies, past the corner. No one seemed to visit the section of forgotten travel books and folk tales. Then, nestled between 2 oversized atlases, she saw it. A book with a worn leather cover. No title, no author, just a painting. A mountain snow-covered under a sky so wide it felt like a breath. She pulled it gently from the shelf and opened to the first page. There were only a few words. If you are holding this, it means the noise has grown too loud. There is a place quiet hidden. If you find a monk named Wang Chi, he will show you the path. Claire read the words 3 times. They didn't feel strange. They felt familiar, like something inside her had just remembered a truth it had been waiting to hear. That night she didn't go out. She didn't watch anything. She didn't text anyone. She sat by the window, the city moving fast below her, and held the book in her lap, like something sacred. She didn't sleep much, not because she was restless, but because for the first time in months, her mind had gone quiet. She looked up flights to Tibet. She searched for the name Wang Chi. She found nothing, only stories, whispers, hints of a path that couldn't be booked or confirmed. And yet, she knew. The next morning, she submitted her vacation request. She packed light, and for the first time in years, she left her laptop behind. When the taxi pulled away from her building, she didn't look back. The streets blurred in the windows. The noise faded into the city behind her, and in her chest, beneath the tiredness, beneath the fear, a single quiet thing began to rise, a softness, a whisper that said, "There's still time. You haven't lost yourself. You're just beginning." And it is Part 2. The Monk and the Mountain. The flight to Tibet was long, not just in hours, but in the way time stretches when you're moving towards something you can't quite name. Claire sat by the window watching as clouds slowly gave way to mountains, snow-capped and silent, ancient as breath itself. She didn't speak much, didn't scroll, didn't plan. Her fingers played absent-mindedly with the edge of the worn book, tucked safely in the pocket of her coat. The book had no map, no instructions, no coordinates, only a name, Wang Qi, and a whisper of something she couldn't explain, a feeling, maybe, that this was exactly where she needed to be. When she stepped off the bus at the base of the small village, the air greeted her like a lullaby. Cool, clear, thin in her lungs, but full in her chest, the kind of air that made silence feel complete. The village was modest, stone houses with painted doors, prayer flags fluttering like whispers above narrow streets, snow nestled in the corners of rooftops melting slowly beneath the sun. She wandered. There were no signs, no tourist stalls, just the soft rhythm of footsteps on dirt paths, and the occasional murmur of wind chimes from unseen porches. She asked a woman tending to a small garden, "Excuse me, do you know someone named Wang Qi?" The woman didn't answer right away. She simply looked at Claire not unkindly but deeply, as if weighing something behind her eyes. Then with a nod, she pointed toward the mountains. "Up there," she said softly. "You'll find him near the old monastery, but he doesn't speak often. He teaches by silence." Claire nodded. That felt right. The path to the monastery wound through pine and stone, sometimes disappearing into fog, sometimes opening onto sweeping cliffs where the world stretched endlessly below. Claire walked slowly. Her breath came in short bursts, her heart beat loudly in her ears. But she didn't turn back. There was no rush, and strangely no fear, only a deep stillness that seemed to grow with each step. By the time she reached the gate, the sun had dipped behind the peaks. Twilight gathered like a blanket over the world. The monastery stood quiet, built of wood and stone, tucked into the mountain like it had grown from it. And there, standing by a stack of firewood, was an old man. He wore simple robes. His hair was grey, his face lined with age, but his eyes were still, not empty but whole, as if he had seen everything, and now chose only to see what mattered. Claire approached slowly. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "Are you Wang Qi?" He nodded once with the smallest of smiles. She opened her mouth to ask more, to explain, to justify her presence, but the words stayed behind her lips, and to her own surprise she said nothing. He gestured not with command but invitation and led her inside. The monastery was simple. Wooden floors, stone walls, a single long table set with tea. No gold, no grandeur, only the quiet kind of beauty that didn't need to be seen to be felt. Wang Qi poured 2 cups without asking what she liked. He handed her one. The steam rose in the cold air and smelled faintly of ginger and earth. They sat in silence, It was not awkward. It was not tense. It was sacred. Claire took a sip. The tea warmed her from the inside out. Not just her throat, but something deeper. Something she hadn't named in years. She looked at the monk. "I'm tired," she said quietly. "Not just from the walk, not just from the travel." He nodded. "I don't know what I'm doing here." Another nod, a sip of tea. "Everything feels too much, too fast, too loud. Even when I'm alone, it's like the noise doesn't stop." He looked at her, and this time he spoke. Only 3 words, "Then be quiet." Claire blinked. The phrase was not said harshly. There was no scolding, no demand. It was said like a suggestion, a direction, like the simplest truth. Then be quiet. She stayed the night. Her room was small. No electricity, no phone service, only candlelight, a thick wool blanket, and the sound of the wind moving through the mountains like a breath that never ended. She lay down and stared at the ceiling. She didn't reach for her phone. There was nothing to check. No messages waiting. No red dots begging for attention. And slowly, softly, for the first time in a long while, Claire fell asleep with her heart not racing. She didn't dream, not of cities or schedules or mistakes, only stillness and the sound of her own breath finally heard. Part 3. The 2 paintings' morning came softly, not with alarms or urgency, but with a slow bloom of light through the wooden window slats, a pale golden hush that touched the floor, the walls, and finally Claire's eyelids, gently coaxing them open. For a moment she didn't move. There was no rush, no thought pressing into her mind, no list unrolling in her head, only stillness, and the surprising feeling that she had slept. Not just rested, but slept. Deep, dreamless, whole. She sat up, wrapped the wool blanket around her shoulders and listened. There were no voices, no motors, only the wind, and somewhere in the distance a bell, low, steady, calling nothing, announcing everything. Wang Qi was already outside, seated on a bench carved from stone, gazing toward the mountains as if watching the world breathe. He didn't speak when Claire appeared, just patted the spot beside him. She sat. They watched in silence as the mist lifted off the trees, revealing ridges painted in snow and pine. After a while, he stood. "Come," he said softly. Claire followed. He led her down a narrow hallway, its walls lined with time-worn prayer scrolls. The wood creaked gently beneath their feet. Sunlight poured through small windows like rivers of gold. At the end of the hall, a door. Wang Qi opened it, without words, and stepped aside. Claire entered slowly. The room was quiet, bare, except for a single low bench and 2 large canvases propped against the far wall. Both were covered with thin cloths. Wang Qi walked to the first painting. He lifted the cloth. Claire stared. It was a landscape, but not just any landscape. It was peace, a lake still and endless, mirroring a sky soft with dawn, mountains sleeping in the distance, trees, gently bowed as if in prayer. The colors were muted pastel and powdery, as though the whole world had exhaled and left behind only silence. Claire felt something loosen in her chest, like a knot beginning to unravel. She could smell the air in the painting, hear the water, feel the hush. It made her want to cry, but not from sadness, from recognition. Wang Qi said nothing. He let her linger. Then slowly he turned to the second painting. He lifted the cloth. This one was chaos. A city skyline but cracked, burning at the edges. Skies red with urgency. Figures faceless, moving in all directions, but going nowhere. Wires tangled, signs blinking in unreadable script. Hands outstretched, but never touching. The colors were sharp, harsh, too bright and too dark all at once. And at the center of the canvas, a single figure curled inward, head buried in her arms. Claire felt her breath catch. It wasn't fear, it was knowing. That figure was her. She stepped back. Her hands trembled. "I don't understand," she whispered. Wang Qi looked at her with eyes as calm as ever. "You do," he said gently. "You just haven't said it yet." They left the room in silence. Claire said nothing for the rest of the day, not because she was afraid, but because her mind for the first time was feeling not thinking. She sat on the porch that evening, watching the clouds drift like thoughts through a sky slowly turning to night. She thought of the peaceful painting, how much she longed for it. She thought of the chaotic one, how much she feared it. But the longer she sat wrapped in wool and quiet, the more she began to wonder. Maybe they were both her. Maybe one was who she had been, and one who she was becoming. Or maybe they weren't two at all. Maybe peace and chaos could live in the same frame, in the same breath, in the same heart. That night, she didn't sleep easily. Not because she was anxious, but because something was stirring. Something real. She dreamed of standing between two mirrors, each reflecting a different world. And for the first time, she didn't choose. She simply stood still and breathed. Part 4. Silence between days. The silence was not immediate. It arrived in slow folds like snow, settling over a forest layer by layer, sound by sound. On the morning of her 4th day at the monastery, Wang Qi met Claire at the doorway as she wrapped her shawl around her shoulders. He didn't speak. He only handed her a small folded cloth, and inside it a note. It read, 10 days of silence. No words, no writing, no asking. Just stay just. Listen. At the bottom, a single line written in light brushstroke. Let the truth arise not from effort, but from stillness. Claire stood there for a moment, holding the note like something sacred. Then she nodded, said nothing and walked toward the garden. The first day felt like a small hunger, not of the body, but of the mouth. Of the mind's need to explain, to reach for words like bread, to narrate even the quietest thought. She found herself turning to speak out of habit, to comment on a breeze or the color of the tea, but the words would stop half-formed and dissolve like snowflakes on her tongue. There was no one to answer her, no one to fill the pauses, only the wind in the trees, the crackle of firewood, the sound of her own footsteps on stone. By day 3, the ache of silence had become something else, not emptiness but space, a kind of spaciousness she had never known. Inside it, she noticed things, small things. The way light shifted across the wooden floor, the softness in the eyes of an old monk who tended the herbs each morning, the gentle tug of breath entering and leaving her body as if it had its own rhythm, older than thought. And inside, her old things stirred, memories she hadn't called for, but that arrived anyway. the voice of her mother humming while doing the dishes, the feeling of grass under her bare feet as a child. The first time she ever felt truly seen. They rose and fell like birds passing across a quiet sky. She began each day at dawn, not by rule but by instinct. She would sit on a flat stone near the edge of the hill facing east, where the sun would rise slowly through clouds like a secret being revealed. She didn't try to meditate, didn't count breaths or repeat mantras. She simply sat and allowed herself to be. There were hours when her mind wandered, where questions surfaced like ripples. What would happen when she returned? Who would she be? But she didn't chase them. She let them pass, like leaves on a river. On the sixth night, she woke just before midnight. The air was still, the moon nearly full, cast soft shadows through the window. She didn't light a candle, didn't reach for her coat. She stepped outside barefoot onto the cold stone. The world was silver frost shimmered on the ground. The pines stood still like guardians of a dream. And overhead stars, so many stars, too many to name. She looked up for a long time, her breath curling into the cold, and something inside her whispered, "This is what it means to be alive. Not to do, not to win, but to stand beneath a sky like this and remember you belong to it." The days that followed were gentler. The quiet became a companion, not empty, but rich. Sometimes it cradled her. Sometimes it revealed things. She saw how often she had filled silence with noise, not to communicate, but to distract. She saw how she had chased peace like a goal to be reached, when in truth, it was always here waiting, just beneath the noise. She wept once, not from pain, but from the beauty of a leaf falling, a single golden leaf spinning slowly without resistance, finding its way to the earth as if it had always known how. On the 10th day she awoke with a single word resting gently in her mind. Enough. Not as in finished. Not as in I've done enough. But I am enough. Even in stillness, even in unknowing, even here. Especially here. That evening, Wang Qi met her at the gate. He didn't ask her to speak, but he held out both hands and she took them. In his eyes, there was no question, no answer, only recognition, like someone looking into a mirror and seeing not a stranger, but a return. She bowed her head, and for the first time without words, she felt understood. Kushti, atititi, fesastinti. Part 5, The Mirror of Truth. It had been 10 days of silence, and now the world sounded different. Not louder, not brighter, but clearer. Claire moved through the monastery, like one who had begun to listen, not just with ears, but with her breath. The bell no longer marked time, it marked stillness. The creak of wood beneath her feet felt intimate, like a familiar voice saying, "You are here." She hadn't spoken, but she had heard everything. And today, Wang Qi called her back to the room, to the paintings, to the moment she had not finished. The door looked the same, wooden quiet, painted by light. But when she stepped through it, the air felt different, not heavy, but expectant. The two paintings stood at the far end, covered again in linen cloth. Wang Qi stood beside them, still no words. He gestured to her and stepped back. This time, she would uncover them. She approached the first painting, the peaceful one. Her hands moved slowly as if the cloth were made of memory. She lifted it. There it was, the still lake, the muted dawn, the quiet that had once made her ache with longing. She stared, waited, but now it felt different. Still beautiful, but not distant. It didn't call to her with a voice of absence. It simply was, a reflection, not a promise. She smiled softly, and without a word turned to the second painting. Her hands paused at the cloth. She breathed in, not from fear, but from readiness. She pulled it away. The chaos returned. The broken skyline, the fractured lines. The woman curled into herself in the center of it all. But Claire didn't flinch. She stepped closer and looked. Truly looked. The figure wasn't unfamiliar anymore. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't even someone she had been. It was someone she still was. A part of her. Not a flaw. Not a failure. But a piece. A truth. She leaned forward. The woman's hair was like hers. The shape of her shoulders. The curve of her spine. But what struck her now was the space around the figure. There was movement in it. Color cracks of gold running through the grey. And Claire saw something she hadn't before. The gold was not invading the chaos. It was born from it, like light that came through the brokenness, not around it. She stepped back. Her chest rose, and for a moment she felt everything at once. The striving, the burnout, the noise, the longing, the quiet, the peace. And she knew they were never separate. She didn't need to erase the noise to find the stillness. She only needed to stop running from it. Wang Qi stepped forward. This time he spoke. Just one question. Which one is you? Claire didn't answer right away. She looked at both paintings, let her gaze move back and forth. Then she turned to him, and for the first time in days, her voice returned gentle, steady. Both Wang Qi smiled, and in that smile she saw something she hadn't understood until now. Acceptance. Not of an identity, but of a wholeness. You are not your calm. You are not your chaos. You are the space where both are allowed to live. That evening, she sat by the fire alone, but not lonely. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, the candle beside her flickered softly. She placed the cloths back over the paintings, not to hide them, but to honor them. And in the quiet that followed, she felt her body sigh a long, slow exhale she hadn't even known was waiting. She wrote one line in her journal before sleep. Peace is not something I found. It's something I finally stopped avoiding. Part 6. The departure. The morning she left, the sky was the softest shade of rose. It bled slowly into the horizon, coloring the snow in gentle blush, as though the mountain itself were exhaling after a long silent meditation. Claire stood at the edge of the garden, her pack light on her shoulders, not the same one she had arrived with. This one held fewer things but more meaning. Her fingers curled around the strap, her eyes drawn toward the familiar trail that wound down from the monastery into the world below. The same trail she had climbed 10 days ago, breathless, heavy, full of questions. Now she stood still, full of something else. Not answers, but peace. Wang Qi approached his robe, brushing against the stone path with a sound like silk through pine needles. He carried nothing, not even a farewell. He stopped beside her. They didn't speak. They had spoken enough without words, and still there was one more thing to say. Claire turned to him, and in her voice there was no trembling, only gratitude. "Thank you for the silence," she said softly, "for not trying to fix me, for not giving me answers I didn't need, for letting me hear myself again." He smiled, and then after a pause, "You'll forget." Claire tilted her head. "The noise," he said, "it will return. The city, the rush, the asking. You will forget this stillness, and that's okay." She nodded slowly. "But you will remember again," he continued. "Not by effort, not by searching, but in small ways." He placed a hand over his chest, like a pause between breaths, like the light before dawn, like the moment before sleep, when everything softens. Claire felt tears gather at the corner of her eyes, but they didn't fall. They simply stayed like blessings. Wang Qi bowed his head, and she bowed in return. Not goodbye, but acknowledgement, like two quiet truths recognizing each other. The path downward was gentle. Each step was familiar yet new, like retracing the lines of a letter you once wrote, but only now understood. The wind moved through the branches like a song without melody. The air was thin, but it didn't take her breath. It gave it back. Halfway down the trail she paused, turned around. The monastery stood behind her, small now like a dream, half remembered, but in her chest she could still feel it. Not the building, not the paintings, but the silence, the space she had found and carried. That night she stayed in a guest house at the edge of a quiet village. The bed was simple. The window cracked open to let in the chill. The stars spilled across the sky like someone had broken a bowl of light. She lit a small candle by the bed, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't reach for her phone. She didn't wonder what tomorrow held. She didn't fill the night with thought. She simply lay down, pulled the blanket over her shoulders, and placed one hand on her chest, felt her heartbeat, felt her breath, and whispered just before her eyes closed, "The mountain is not gone. It lives here now." Part 7. The Return. New York hadn't changed. The yellow cabs still hummed like bees in concrete alleys. Sirens still threaded through traffic like violins tuned too tightly. People still rushed, eyes down, voices clipped. The air was thicker, the sky dimmer. The light bounced faster, harder, as if even the sun couldn't slow down here. Claire stepped onto the sidewalk outside the airport, her small bag at her side. She waited for the noise to press in, for the hum of life to crowd her chest like it used to. But instead, there was space, not around her, but within her. She took a cab to her apartment, the same block, the same bakery, the same saxophone above. She unlocked the door, turned the knob, stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of lavender and memory. Her plants had survived. A neighbor had watered them, and maybe, just maybe, they had waited for her return. She didn't unpack. Not yet. Instead, she made tea, chamomile, let the kettle whistle its soft song, poured it slowly, sat by the window. The city stretched below, restless, glittering, moving, and she watched it like one watches the sea, no longer needing to swim in it, just letting it be. She took a sip. Warmth spread down her throat into her chest. Her shoulders softened. Her breath found its rhythm. Later that evening, she opened her journal. She hadn't written anything since Tibet, but tonight there were no rules. She didn't try to capture anything profound. She simply wrote, "The world hasn't changed, but I have. I am not a different person. I am a quieter one. And maybe that is enough." She smiled, closed the book, blew out the candle and stood, not to do, not to finish, just to rest. That night she lay in bed and let the city hum around her, not fighting it, not needing it to hush. She had found a quiet the world couldn't take away. It lived in her breath, in the pause before thought. In the space between the noise, she placed a hand on her heart, closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you to the mountain, to Wang Qi, to silence, to herself." Sleep came like snowfall, silent, complete, unhurried, and beneath it all a steady rhythm rose and fell like waves, like breath, like peace that no longer needed to be found, only remembered.